And that's why if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you want to be around in 100 years, you need a property company with your assets have to be property. They cannot be credit and they cannot be cash. Bitcoin does represent the solution to the problem that ails the civilization right now.
I'm a big believer in narratives and stories, and I think narratives and stories drive markets. They drive how people think. And we spoke about this a little bit at your house, you know, the whole thing of money being stored energy and all that kind of thing. And I'm looking around now and going, what are the new narratives that are going to drive Bitcoin forward in the next bull market? And, you know, we're talking about international corporations, so they kind of need an international store of value and a digital store of value. And, you know, what better international digital store of value than Bitcoin? So, but this is sort of very big end stuff. When we were in Miami, you spoke about the use of the Lightning Network, for example, on Amazon. You know, I buy a book on Amazon and then I give it a rating and I get a little reward of a Lightning coin, and then I write a review and I get another little reward, and then the review gets lots of readers and I get another little reward, and then the readers lead to book sales, so perhaps I get a tiny share in the book sales and so on. But it's a real kind of micro payments driver of Bitcoin adoption and usage. And you said that the technology for that is kind of already there. Again, the main barriers are regulatory. Can we talk about that kind of story for a little bit?
Sure. But since you brought it up, I think it's important to note the really big idea is the separation of property from the earth, or the digital transformation of property. There are hundreds of trillions of dollars of capital that are tied up in property like buildings and land. And if you look at the wealthy around the world, they store a lot of their wealth in property assets. And in an inflationary environment, when you're inflating the money supply by 7% a year, the only way to stay ahead of that is to have a balance sheet which is property heavy. So I would say there's probably three drivers for Bitcoin's advancement. One is the digital transformation of property from physical property to digital property. The second is the conversion of corporate balance sheet from credit assets or debt assets, which are liabilities, to property assets, which are actually assets that are appreciating in value, like Bitcoin. And the third driver is the digital transformation of money, the ability to move money at the speed of light between a corporation and their customers or their partners. If I have $1 billion building in London, and if the pound gets inflated by 7% in supply, then the currency I have loses 7% of its value between January 1st and the end of the year.
Sure. I'm
But
going to interrupt you 1 second, Michael.
Yeah.
We have a thing called trueflation that tells you what real inflation actually is. I think you probably have it in the States. And in the UK, we're now at 12%. It's not even 7%, it's 12%.
Now, I give you two companies. I give you a company that owns $1 billion of land in London or property. And I give you a company that has $1 billion of sovereign debt of the UK. On January 1st, if there's a 12% trueflation rate, the guy that owns the first company knows that his balance sheet's going to go up by 12%, and he's going to make 121 million pounds by the end of the year. The guy that owns the second company is going to get a 3% yield, and the debt is going to lose 12% of its value. And so the guy that owns the second company is going to lose, well, actually, they're going to accrete nominally by 3% by 30 million pounds, but their assets won't be worth anymore. So there's a 90 million pound difference between a credit balance sheet or a debt-laden balance. As I say credit, you're owning credit of the US of the UK government. So the person that owns the credit is 90 million pounds behind the person that owns the property. If you just take it to the extreme, you just own the cash. Well, your cash is worth 12% less at the end of the year. Your balance sheet of property is keeping track. So what you can see is that over the course of 10 years, companies that own property at that inflation rate are going to find their property value triples. And over the course of the same 10 years, the companies that just have the cash are going to have the same amount of cash, but it'll be worth 1/3 as much or something. So the companies that are operating companies that are required to hold cash or cash equivalents are being bled to death, and they're going to be bankrupted. And the companies that own property, the REITs, are going to keep up with the inflation. So the big idea here is twofold. One, you don't really want to own billion-dollar buildings in London. You want to own $1 billion of a digital building that has no property tax, that can move to any city in the world that can be upgraded with technology. There's a cost to owning the real estate. It's also, you can only buy the $1 billion building with $1 billion of capital. But if you're a taxi cab driver in London, you want to acquire the building at £287 a month. You need to acquire incremental property. So digital property is better than physical property because digital property is just better. Lower maintenance, lower tax. You can buy it and sell it in smaller portions. You don't need to be a rich family in London with an army of lawyers in order to buy Bitcoin. If there's cheap credit available, I mean, for example, if the government creates an organization like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and they give people 2% mortgages and everybody can borrow with loan to value of 100% at 2%, then home prices go up.
Oh, absolutely. And if we could only buy houses for cash, house prices would be a lot lower.
But that's an example of another government subsidy.
Absolutely.
Government is subsidizing credit and it's creating an inflationary bubble. True. I think the more important point is every company on earth that's required to hold its balance sheet in cash or cash equivalents is being bled 7 to 14% a year by monetary inflation. And that's why all the companies fail. And that's why if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you want to be around in 100 years, you need a property company with your assets have to be property. They cannot be credit and they cannot be cash. Bitcoin does represent the solution to the problem that ails the civilization right now. And the reason I wanted to focus upon that was because we're talking about $900 trillion of assets that are either cash equivalents or currency derivatives or currencies or defective assets or defective forms of property. And if half of that migrates, it changes every family, every individual, every institution, every government, everywhere on earth.